Hi and welcome to this rigging tutorial. I'll be rigging a ship in the 1 to 700 scale. I'm also going to show you a couple of older ships that I rigged. So the model I'm using today is a Turner models 3D print that actually got sent to me by Turner himself when he got his Bamboo A1. And I would recommend actually having a resin print. But it's okay, needs a little bit more cleaning when you do filament printing. So immediately into the build, and we're going to be using brass masts. I'm going to be using plastic, 3D printed parts and brass masts. And these are the different diameters that I used. 1.5, 1, 0.8, 0.5, 0.4. Actually 0.5 I would prefer 0.6, but for this build I didn't have 0.6, so I used 0.5. Many parts that I use for the brass, I just glue them together, like you can see here. And that actually holds really well using a cyanoacrylate glue, but the gel version. And this is the bowsprit. You see I also have the dolphin striker there sticking down, and I also use brass sheets. It's actually leftover brass sheets from the photo edge ratlines that I get from Atlantic models. I just cut out pieces and I drill holes in them, and that's to hold the yard arms. That's a really good way to keep your yard arms in places, by using those little brass plates with a small drill hole, and then making sure that it stays in place step by step. If you can, when you're building a model like this, the best, if you have a historical ship, would be to find actual mast heights of the historical ships, and that's what I tried to do with this USS Chesapeake. But if you don't, if you have like plastic masts from Warlord Games, you just can go from the measurements of those. Or if you maybe have some plans in larger scale, maybe for a wooden ship, so wooden model ship, then you can just scale that down to 1/700 scale to get your measurements. So a couple of different ways to go about it. Third way would be just going by feel, and I've done that sometimes too, and it's kind of works out once you get a hang of things. So there's different diameters here in the bowsprit. You see I think I've used 1 millimeter, and then I used 0.8, and then 0.5, and then 0.4 for the yard arm. For the masts, this time around, I decided to use I always try around stuff. Usually I would use just brass all the way, but for this one I use the bottoms of Warlord Games plastic masts from their third rate spur, or third rate frame. And I filed little holes, or little grooves in them to fit the lower yard arms. And I wanted the yard arms slightly so like the ship would be heeling a little bit to the left there. The plastic is a little bendy, but I figured just using it for the bottom part would be fine. And it turned out really okay. It's quite thick, the plastic there for the lower part. I ended up filing down that because I used the yard arm in plastic for the mizzen mast. And I ended up filing that down quite a bit because it's quite wide compared to the others. A little bit. It doesn't show so much later on, but if you're really, then you should do that. Here you can see the fighting tops, and the fighting tops there are from Turner Miniatures as well. So that's a 3D printed mast, and I snipped them off there. You will see later when I built my HMS Surprise, I actually cut holes in them and let the mast pass through, which would be the best way I found so far. But sometimes if you don't have the time, you can just go with a little bit of a quicker way, and I will show you soon here what I did for the HMS, or no, HMS, I'm used to building British ships, the USS Chesapeake. The Chesapeake, I'm hoping I'm going to be doing a battle report soon with her and my HMS Shannon there, recreating that battle. So here we have the fighting tops, and you see I'll drill a hole for the top section on the top, and then for the lower section on this one I didn't drill a hole, but normally I would drill a hole with a little bit wider drill bit, going carefully with that hand drill bit, and then you'll get that in place. building it up, checking the heights, checking the alignment of the yard arms. Yard arms doesn't always have to go symmetrically. I tend to do it with my ships because, you know, that's just a look, but maybe later on I'll start going a little bit more different ways with the yard arms and so on. You learn, and I also learn. I feel like with every build I learn something. Sometimes I end up doing an old mistake on a newer build. I guess that happens to you guys too. But this way I found the why I'm doing it. Actually, why am I doing my own mast? Because there are the perfectly fine options. There's the Warlord mast in plastic. I find their yard arms a little thick, but if I'm just building a third rate for my fleet, there is a high probability I just go with the masts in plastic from Warlord Games third rate Pro, just to save time, and also I strengthen the yard arm maybe with some brass rod. But mostly if you just want to go fast, that's perfectly fine. They do bend a bit, that's the thing. So if you want your mast to be really stable and maybe take some tension from when you're making your standing rigging or your running rigging, then the way to go is building your own in brass. And it's also much more fun. I mean, I find it more involved to build my own masts, and to be honest, like I said, it does look a little better. The ones that I like the least are, so far that I tried a couple of different brands, also Warlord Games, are the ones in metal, the metal masts, because they're very bendy and hard to get straight. Like brass is so much better because it doesn't bend the same way, and so much easier to build with. So for the Chesapeake here, and you will see that on other side, I do some more strengthening of the joints, so around where the different mast sections are glued together with the cyanoacrylate glue. And I'll do it a little bit later on this one. It doesn't show very well in photos, but I strengthened that up with some bond cement and so on. Sometimes I'll use plastic or brass to go around it, just to strengthen those, to make sure that the mast doesn't crack where the glue is. The glue is really strong, I have to say. That cyanoacrylate glue I'm using is from Green Stuff World, and it's their gel version, as I said, and that's super strong. I haven't had anything break. And once I put my hand on top of a ship, and then I broke all the mast, but I managed to repair that after the fact, actually, since they were all held together by the rigging anyway. Here you have examples of those little brass sheets that I've been using, just small things that I cut out and I drill the holes in, and then later I'll round the front edge off, and I also bend it in, because otherwise if it's sticking out on the front there, then you'll have a problem when you want to get your sail on there later on. Since these are so thin compared to for instance the Warlord game yard arms, you'll have a bit sticking out there. So if you just have those two pointy edges of that little brass sheet sticking out, it's going to be getting in the way of what you do. So bend those in and glue them in place to make sure. But as you can see, this becomes a very, very strong hold. I've used here, it's actually from a kit. It's the sails from the USS Constitution kit that you can buy. I can't remember the maker right now. I'll probably add it in the comments below. But if you want to find out, but so those I've used those measurements a little bit because they kind of corresponded a little bit. I cut them a little bit shorter and so on. Anyway, so here is the furled lower sail, and I've tried a couple of different ways. In the end, I have to say the best way so far is not what I'm doing on this build. It has definitely been actually being really patient and kind of doing origami with paper, like folding the actual sail, wet it up and fold the sail using glue and water. But I wanted to try a different way. So this is combination. One is just all this heat, thermoplastic that you can heat up. It's called Warbla. It's my wife who uses it for cosplay and stuff like that. And then one, I use some of that thermoplastic, but also I also use some 3D print parts from Turner Miniatures. So I wanted her to look a bit like she did in the painting that I was inspired by for this, where she also had that streak that I suppose she had just below the gun ports. And there she had the Tegallants furled. So I ended up furling all the Tegallants on this build. Turned out so-so, again using thermoplastic. Another time I'm just going to go back to using some kind of green putty or something, some kind of modeling putty, but because that's superior. But you end up testing different things and you know, smoothing things out. They're not smoother yet, but later on smoothing things out. I think it turned out okay. Here you see the EZ line. EZ line is my favorite for the running rigging. So any rigging where I want it to stay tensioned and that is supposed to be a little bit thinner, I use this EZ line. The EZ line is really good. And these are the lifts. So at this point I ended up putting in the lift. Sometimes, and I think in the future I'll go back to that, I would put in the lifts almost at the end, because they are kind of fiddly, or kind of in the way, and it becomes kind of fiddly to do the standing rigging with this in, because you're going to have to run the standing rigging through them as you're tying it. So here we have, I've started to paint the model, gotten a bit further, and also fixed up the sails quite a bit. You have to remember that all these shots that we're doing now are real close-ups, so it's very seldom someone is going to be looking really close like this, right? And you have this spinning view on the side here, where you'll see the ship actually with all the pennant and all the ensigns in place, like she had on that historical painting at the time of the duel. Here I've started putting in some crew, because this build where I use the Masts is supposed to be with the Shannon, so it's a build where I put in a little bit more time, a little bit more effort, and I wanted to have some crew as well. And these are actually photo etch crew, so they're just really flat, but you don't really see that at this scale. And they're pre-painted, they're from Edward. And then I just repaint them. So the US Marines, they're supposed to have this blue jackets. So you see the Marines here in the fighting top. I just repaint parts and maybe I added some hats and so on. When you're playing a game, you're hardly going to notice. So I would actually, if you're just making a game piece and you're not a complete mad person like me, you don't need it. You're not going to notice it. I never really think when I play games that I have this crew, but for the feeling that knowing like, okay, this is the Chesapeake and it's going to be facing off against my Shannon, and I want to make it really nice. And I mean, for photos, and I also have people sometimes that I do commissions for, and sometimes they would like something extra special, and then I spend the extra time to do it. The sails are just copying paper, like premium copying paper, and then I just so I transfer that stuff across, like you saw earlier. The Constitution, I cut it down to size to fit my yardarms, or the heights of my yardarms here for the Chesapeake, which is slightly smaller than the Constitution. They're both large frigates, but Constitution is a even larger frigate. So I ended up cutting them down, and I just painted with some thinned paint. Painting this. On the Shannon, I actually used pencil to draw some stuff in, and that turned out really nice, actually nicer than this. So again, experimenting. So some of the stuff on this model is not the best I've done, but I figured for a video where you see me building masts and I give some pointers, then it will be totally fine. And here you see that I've added the standing rigging. Some of the standing rigging will be double thread from Warlord Games, like I double it and glue it together. I mentioned that in my other video, and I set a link here for that one, where I explain how you can go about rigging your ship and adding standing rigging and running rigging. Of course, not completely full, because that would be probably really hard. Someone has probably done it. There's people that are much better than me, but I find for a high-end game model, I found a good balance with this. So using some cleats and so on. And added the texture to the base. Maybe it looks like crud because before it dries. So here I threw in some, because this is another set that I've just started. They're not going to be finished in this video, but I just wanted to show you where I'm having the lower parts of the masts in brass as well. So this is Fair American. It's a small brig. It was actually captured by the Hawaiians at some point. And then there's the HMS Courier. It's a capture brig that the British captured the French. So that's probably going to feature in one of my videos pretty soon here. Because I'm going to be using, but we're actually going to play again with Warlord game rules for that one. But we're going to do the USS Essex against I can't remember the name, the Phoebe, and there was a brig there as well. So we're going to do that for our next battle in 2 weeks. So going back to Black Seals rules and our home rules, and here you can see how I drill the bottom side. The hole didn't become completely straight here, so I ended up widening it and then just filling it with glue. That works just fine. It doesn't show later. We file it, and it's also on the underside. And here you see the top side drilled with a smaller drill bit, and that way the lower mast section, the top mast section will be really secure. You have to remember, if you're measuring from Warlord Games, remember that you add a millimeter to go into the actual fighting top section, and then also deduct that whole fighting top section from your mast section, so to say, so that you get the right heights if you're measuring from Warlord Game masts, for instance. If you're just going from historical measurements, again, yes, you also need to remember that you cut that part off that the fighting top is taking up in your yarn. And here's the cross trees. I'm going to end up sawing a bit in this to make them look more like real cross trees, but this is also 3D prints for Turner Miniatures. I think it's nice to go from. For the Chesapeake, and you'll see that later, I actually used some very thin 0.4 millimeter brass just to try to build those little cross trees from that, but I wasn't completely happy with the result. It looks good, looks okay, but it could be better. So yeah, just showing the scale. Some of these brigs, when you're using Turner Miniatures, since this is more like true to scale, you'll see that they are very small. This is tiny stuff. Turns out also that is my favorite to build. I mean, I love frigates. I'm really in love with frigates, bigger ships. I do them because I want to play with them, and for maybe on a commission. But my absolute favorites are going to be brigs and frigates. And then building these really small brigs, and then even smaller, like a cutter, is a lot of fun, because you just need to compete with yourself to see how much detail you can throw in here. And here we have a very small, it's a pickle, it's a schooner. And this is also a model from Turner Miniatures. I just wanted to show close up. On this one I didn't use brackets, I just tried to go without brackets, and it turned out okay. So here we have the Rattlesnake, Privateer Rattlesnake, that was later named Cormorant, ship-rigged sloop of war, three-masted ship. And here I also used, I also built my own masts, same way as you saw on that brig, like drilling from below and then also drilling from above for the fighting top. So I didn't put the fighting top on the back, on the mizzen mast. I actually used a dab of glue. It looks so, but for a game model works fine. This is my HMS Surprise, and this is probably the one where I think I succeeded the best with the ones I built myself, running the mast through the fighting top. So you actually see that I cut out a section on the fighting top and let the mast run right through it, the mast section run through it, and that's also going to strengthen the bond between the two mast sections, and also it looks really nice. But there is different ways, and that's the whole point of a tutorial, right? I'm telling you different ways to do this. And here's a close-up from below of the same model there. with the rat lines, different types of photo etched rat lines. A little bit, I ended up messing that one up a little bit. And here I have the Shannon. This is the one who fought the Chesapeake. This is also a pretty recent build. I just built this one recently, but here you can see the same way. For the lower mass, on this one I used Turner miniatures. So this is 3D printed lower mass sections. Also the furled sails are 3D printed. So there's many different ways to go about this. Try different ways and see what fits you, which way is best for you. If you see anything in this video or any other video of mine, just throw me a question below in the comments. I'll try to answer it for you. This is one of my earlier where I built myself. This is actually a mast kit. Of course, you build your masts yourself in the kit, but in the kit you got all the different diameters and everything you needed, and the really nice 3D printed. This is my HMS Cornwallis. This one, the really nice 3D printed fighting tops. This is actually from a model of the Constitution. So, but I really like those rat lines. Oh, including a dog here. I can see on the photo. I didn't see that earlier. That happens. You just have to clean these things up once in a while. Here you see the crew in a close-up, but also how the masts are put together. That's sometimes you're more successful, other times less. This is a really successful model, I find. It's a good example of how good it can look when you build your own masts. And here is the finished version of this. So this is the USS Chesapeake in all her glory, with all her ensigns. She carried 3 when she did her battle with, and also this free trade and sailors' rights flag or ensign in the foremast, and commissioning pennant on the top of the middle mast or main mast, and then at the mizzen, and also ensign at the back, and then further down. And I mean, I think all in all it turned out pretty okay, the whole thing, the whole build. And of course, if you look at the photo I used in the beginning, you see that in the beginning of this video, or not photo, but the painting that I was inspired by. I tried to get it as close to that, also with the way things are looking sail-wise and so on. Also the paintwork with those thinner stripes below the gun ports. So this is a little bit different than was normally done, both for the British and the American ships. But what I've managed to find out, looking through all the sources, at the time of the duel, this was actually, maybe the stripe was thinner than I have it here, but there was a stripe, white stripe below the gun ports on this ship. A little bit of a spinny, and her beside the Shannon. A little bit of a teaser for the coming battle between the two. This will be a little bit later when I have the time for it, but I think I'm going to use the B3/4 rules for that, so it's going to be a really in-depth fight between the two. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. All the subscriptions really helps, and give a like to the video if you like it, and press the notified button so you can get notified. And as I said, any comments you have, or anything you want to ask about, just ask away below.